Attorney General nominee. Senators take aim at Catholic William Barr on the first day of his confirmation hearing. What he's saying about the special counsel's Russia probe. A long road to recovery. Bishops from Chile look to the future after a sex abuse scandal rocked the country. We're in Rome with details of their meeting with Pope Francis. Another caravan is coming. A group of Honduran migrants are on their way to the U.S. And they are the champions. The president welcomes the Clemson football team to the White House and picks up the tab for a tasty dinner. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump's nominee for Attorney General says he believes Russia meddled in the 2016 presidential election. William Barr says the special counsel investigation into the president is not a witch hunt and must continue. That's a pointed departure from the president's own views. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports from the first day of his hearing. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. It has been going all day. Right now, they are on a little break behind me. But William Barr has sat in the hot seat before. He was Attorney General for President George H.W. Bush from 1991 to 1993. The Catholic lawyer promises if he's confirmed, he'll tackle violent crime and enforce immigration law, and then go after foreign interference in our elections. But Democrats want to know, will he stop Mueller's probe?
Nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
William Barr vows his role as Attorney General will be above politics.
I am not going to do anything that I think is wrong, and I will not be bullied into doing anything I think is wrong by anybody, whether it be editorial boards or Congress or the president. I'm going to do what I think is right.
He says that includes not interfering with Special Counsel Mueller's investigation.
When directed by President Nixon to fire the special counsel, the prosecutor investigating Watergate, Richardson refused and resigned instead, as we all well know. If the president directed you to change those regulations and then fire Mueller, or simply directly fired Mueller, would you follow Richardson's example and resign instead?
Assuming there was no good cause?
Assuming no good cause.
I would not carry out that instruction.
Republicans quizzed Barr on other issues like immigration.
We need money right now for border security,
Yes,
including barriers and walls and slats and other things, anything that makes sense in different areas of the border.
Okay. And religious freedom.
I believe in the separation of church and state, but I am sometimes concerned that we not use governmental power to suppress the freedoms of traditional religious communities in our country.
Tomorrow, senators are back for round 2 of Barr's confirmation hearing. The 68-year-old Barr has been a member of the Knights of Columbus since 1984. He's also served on the McCain and Romney presidential campaigns as part of their Catholic advisory groups. And he also funded scholarships for New York City inner-city kids so they could attend Catholic schools. Lauren?
Barr has been critical of the Supreme Court Roe versus Wade decision in the past. What did he say today?
When he was questioned behind me, Barr said Roe is established precedent. He adds he would enforce the law that protects abortion clinics, but in the past, Barr has described Roe as not resting on the Constitution.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. And News Nightly's Jason Calvi also did question the new president of Planned Parenthood. Dr. Lena Wen took the reins of the nation's largest abortion provider in November.
That I have to go to another meeting, so, but I appreciate your
What, as a medical doctor, when does life begin, would you say?
Can I, sorry.
Dr. Wen?
The president of Planned Parenthood was at the Capitol with the House's pro-choice caucus to lay out their goals for this session. They took no questions, so our Capitol Hill correspondent went to work to question them. More federal workers go without pay, and Democrats reject an invitation to the White House as the longest government shutdown in history wears on. Meanwhile, President Trump rejects a proposal from his own party to reopen the government. The president says he's ready to make a deal, but he's not willing to budge on border wall funding. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Any attempts to find a solution to this partial shutdown seem frozen in place here at the White House. The president did meet with some Republicans today, but they aren't the ones he has to convince. At this point, officials here hope to just get Democrats back to the negotiating table.
Come back, stop going to Puerto Rico where you're holding a big fundraiser with a bunch of lobbyists, and come back to Washington and let's get to work. Let's get to a deal. We're ready for it. They need to come to the table. I think he's confident.
The White House Director of Strategic Communications there, referring to a group of House and Senate Democrats on retreat in Puerto Rico. The president said he would never, ever back down over his demand for greater border security, including $5.7 billion for a wall. Now, he has rejected a short-term proposal from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham to reopen the government for several weeks. And Democrats demand the government be reopened before border security negotiations continue. More than 40,000 Coast Guard members missed their paychecks today. Democrats say the president needs to stop holding federal employees hostage. An additional 800,000 federal workers missed paychecks last Friday. Lauren.
Mark, how long will these federal workers have to wait before they are finally compensated for their work?
Congress has approved a bill that would provide billions of dollars in back pay for these workers. And the White House tells us the president is looking to sign that bill this week, but federal employees won't receive any of that back pay until after this shutdown is over, Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons reporting on the North Lawn. Thank you, Mark. The Archdiocese of Baltimore launches a new system for reporting allegations of misconduct or concealing clergy abuse by bishops. Archbishop William Lori says 2 independent judges will investigate the claims. The Vatican asked U.S. bishops to delay voting on such measures in their annual meeting in November. The Archbishop says he's turned over 50,000 files to the state attorney general for a probe into misconduct. Lawmakers overwhelmingly reject Prime Minister Theresa May's proposal for Britain to leave the European Union.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
The vote is devastating for May, whose leadership is now under siege. It also means there will be further turmoil for the country only 10 weeks before it's scheduled to leave the EU. Central American migrants set out on another caravan today from Honduras, seeking to reach the United States. About 300 people, mainly women and children, boarded buses. 300 others began walking. The group is following the same route used by thousands last year. One man says they have nowhere else to go. Another says there's no work in Honduras. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is hiking his country's minimum wage by 300%. It's the latest move by the socialist leader to curb a historic economic crisis. But Catholic leaders in the country say Maduro is the one to blame. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. It's not just Catholic leaders. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is one of many top diplomats from around the world calling for Maduro to step down. Pompeo and the country's Catholic bishops all call his recent re-election illegitimate. Maduro is pressing forward, though. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro greeted with applause from his political supporters as he delivers his State of the Nation speech. Maduro dismissing calls to resign from inside and outside his country, saying he will stay on as president for 6 more years. Last week, Maduro was sworn into a second term before the Supreme Court instead of the National Assembly, as is custom. The May 2018 presidential election was boycotted by the opposition amid claims of vote rigging. Some candidates were barred from running. The new head of the opposition, 35-year-old Juan Guaido, is denouncing Maduro. He says he was pulled from his vehicle and detained by police on Sunday, just 1 day after the State Department announced the U.S. is backing his presidency. The U.S., Canada, and 17 Latin American countries do not recognize Maduro's government. They blame him for the country's inflation, food shortages, and mass migration. An estimated 3 million people have fled the country since 2014. The Venezuelan bishops agree. They say his re-election lacks democratic support in justice and law. More than 70% of the country is Catholic. Pope Francis has expressed his support for the Venezuelan bishops and the people, but the Vatican itself has not cut ties with Maduro's government. Some believe that's because they don't want Catholic groups like Caritas kicked out of the country where they're providing help to those who are suffering. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Almost a year after the Vatican sent its most respected sex crimes expert to Chile to investigate abuse, bishops from Chile tell the Pope the road to recovery will be long. 5 members of the Chilean Bishops' Conference met for nearly 3 hours with Pope Francis yesterday to brief him on efforts to address the scandal. On a 2016 trip to Chile, Pope Francis defended a bishop there accused of cover-up and later then recanted his statement. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, the church in Chile, just like here in the U.S., has been rocked by this sex abuse scandal. Tell us what the bishops said about their meeting, which they requested.
Yes, well, we heard from the Secretary General of the Bishops' Conference yesterday, who said that there's a lot of lost credibility in Chile within all institutions, but he said within the church also because of the sins and crimes within the church. And so they really wanted this meeting to brief the Pope about that and to chart a course forward for the future.
There was a big shakeup in the church in Chile following the Pope's visit. I remember on the plane he had said something. What happened there, and now where do we stand?
Yes, well, that visit really sort of brought to a head a lot of the cases of sexual abuse and cover-up, which the Chilean hierarchy had dismissed for many years, and also in one case Pope Francis, who also dismissed a case which turned out to be a case of cover-up. But since then, the Pope brought all the bishops to Rome for a meeting. He pressured them really to submit their resignations. He's accepted 7 resignations from the Chilean bishops. But he's also gone further. He's laicized 2 priests, one of whom was a notorious abuser at the center of all these allegations, as well as two bishops he's laicized. And he's also met with many of the victims. So lots happened since then.
Well, let's move forward. What do you think they're going to learn from this scandal, and how do they recover credibility? It's a question that's being asked all over in the Catholic Church.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of people are saying that not just with Chile, but other countries where this is affected, that there is really a need just to put into force mechanisms really which are already there, that they just need to be acted upon. And I think people are saying that this meeting in February about sex abuse, in which all the presidents, the bishops' conferences will gather here in Rome, will discuss this and take home really measures which they really have to just put into practice, that they're already there. So as the Bishops' Conference Secretary General said yesterday, they hope it's just going to bring them all together and really bring a lot of clarification so that they can go back and know exactly what to do.
We just learned here that Archbishop Lori met with members of the media, and he announced that the Archdiocese of Baltimore is implementing a third-party system for reporting allegations. Was there any comment or talk of the way that the management structure in Chile will change?
Not that I know of, Lauren, no. But as I say, I think a lot of the mechanisms are already in place. So it's really just a case of acting upon them. And I think that's what we're going to see at the end of February. I think possibly with some other new measures as well. But I think a lot of it's just going to be a case of seeing these things through and making sure that they are acted upon. What's
interesting is that a lot of people, including the media, are putting all of the eggs in this February meeting basket. We'll have to see if it lives up to all the hype and expectations. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Lauren.
Pilgrims from around the world are heading to Panama for next week's World Youth Day. Venezuelans cheer inside their bus after arriving in Panama City, and groups of priests, nuns, and young adults were spotted inside the city's airport. Pope Francis will arrive next Wednesday to join those activities. EWTN News Nightly will have reports from Panama next week. Coming up in the broadcast, an author and journalist says propaganda played a role in the making of abortion. And take a look here, remembering the miracle on the Hudson. Today marks the 10th anniversary of the miracle on the Hudson. That's when a flight landed on the Hudson River between New York and New Jersey. The plane had lost engines after hitting a flock of geese. But its pilot, Captain Sully Sullenberger, pulled off the unlikely landing, saving more than 150 lives. 10 years? Wow. This week's March for Life will be followed the next day by the Women's March, and one of that movement's key principles is full access to abortion. But my next guest reminds us historically feminists were pro-life and pro-family. Joining me now is Sue Ellen Browder, journalist and author of the book Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. Sue Ellen, welcome back to our broadcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Let's go back a few years. You were a freelance writer for Cosmopolitan magazine for a very long time.
Right.
Tell us what the atmosphere was like then.
Well, feminism and the sexual revolution were two radically different movements. Betty Friedan, who had started the feminist movement, called Cosmo, which was promoting the sexual revolution, she called Cosmo quite obscene and quite horrible. The feminism and the sexual revolution in those days were two radically different movements. And so then how did they get moved together?
And tell us about that. You had a front row seat to the impact of the sexual revolution.
Yes.
What role did abortion advocates have in this?
Well, the advocates inserted abortion into the feminist movement on November 18th, 1967 in the Chinese room of the Mayflower Hotel here in Washington, D.C. Before that, abortion was not a women's issue.
What happened? How did that come together?
Betty Friedan got conned, if you will. She got persuaded by a man named Larry Lader and his cohort, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, whom you've probably heard of.
Yes, I have.
He became pro-life. He was
He was a convert.
That's right, he was an abortionist.
Catholicism.
That's right. But these two men convinced Betty that she needed to insert abortion in the women's movement's Bill of Rights for all her other rights to be accepted.
How do we establish then feminism with pro-life?
Well, feminism and pro-life, 1/3 of those women in that room that night walked out and later resigned from now over the abortion vote. So those were pro-life women who went on to defend a lot of things that women were fighting for, getting rid of help wanted male and help wanted female ads in newspapers, helping women to serve on juries. Women were being fired for being pregnant. They got the women's pregnancy,
all good things.
All this good stuff. So they fought all of these things, but they were not pro-abortion. You didn't have to be a pro-abortion to win all those things, and they didn't.
And now you look at the Democratic platform, and it is the most pro-abortion platform in history.
Right. They didn't know what happened. And
last year, the Women's March here in Washington made it very clear that pro-life women were not welcome. What can pro-life women do to make their voices heard?
Well, I think we need to reclaim the F word, okay?
Oh, boy.
Feminism. Feminism. Because pro-life feminism is the authentic feminism of the 21st century, and all of these young women who are speaking out for pro-life they're not against women having the right to vote. They're not against women having equal opportunities in education and the workforce. We are the pro-life family feminists of the 21st century, and it's time we called ourselves that.
Sue Ellen Browder, journalist and author of the book Subverted: How I Helped the Sexual Revolution Hijack the Women's Movement. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
A funeral mass will be held tomorrow for the first black bishop to lead a diocese in the U.S. in the 20th century. Bishop Joseph Lawson Howes passed away last week after a long illness. He was 95. Howes was a Catholic convert and the first bishop of a newly created diocese in Biloxi in 1977. He served there for 24 years. Up next, analysis of a new poll on millennials and their views on abortion, and the all-American meal for the national champion Clemson Tigers. With the March for Life just 3 days away, we take a closer look at millennials and their views on abortion. As we reported yesterday, new polling released by Students for Life of America, the nation's largest pro-life student organization, finds 70% of millennials support limits on abortion. The survey also found 65% of millennials want a right to vote on abortion-related policy, compared to 16% who want abortion policy to remain in the hands of judges. 19% were unsure or had no opinion. Joining me now is Students for Life of America President Kristen Hawkins. Kristen, welcome back to our broadcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about what's behind those numbers, wanting a vote versus wanting judges deciding policy.
You know, often we hear about this overturn of Roe, this very scary thing. The political left.
Overturn of Roe versus Wade.
Overturn Roe versus Wade, right? So Netflix and all these other entities have had documentaries about overturning Roe versus Wade and what it's going to mean for women's rights. And we're going to take away women's rights if they can't have the right to abortion. What our poll shows is that it's not so scary. And when you actually tell young people, 18 to 34-year-olds, what Roe versus Wade means and how extreme it is, the fact that it allows for abortion in all 9 months of pregnancy for whatever reason, they actually want to have a say.
So millennials are now the largest voting bloc in the country. From a political standpoint, what do you think the pro-life movement needs to do to capitalize on this?
We can't be afraid to talk about this issue. So often when we're here in Washington, I was just on Capitol Hill today talking with legislators saying, you've got to be courageous and you can't be afraid to talk about this. This is the key human rights issue of our time. And this is what millennials want. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for elected officials who are going to stand up and not be afraid of Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby.
Well, if what you say is true, why do you think reporting depends to depict millennials as pro-abortion?
Well, I think millennials, when you look at overall, they're the least church generation. They lean politically liberal on almost every issue out there, except abortion. So overall, there's a lot of work we have to do on college and high school campuses right now. And I will tell you, I have a lot of these conversations, and it's very scary when the majority won't even acknowledge that there wasn't a creator and they've been created in someone's image. But we can win on this issue because they see abortion as violence. They understand what abortion is. They understand that it's a human rights violation. And so this is something that we need to continue as a pro-life movement. This is why I'm so excited about the March for Life theme this year.
The theme, right?
Yeah, is pro-science, that's life, right? Pro-life is pro-science, and that's exactly what we need to be talking about.
Before we go, if there are any students who are listening to this conversation, where can they meet up with you? When the march, what are you guys doing here?
You'll see us, our big 20-foot We Are the Pro-Life Generation banners. We'll be handing out free I Am the Pro-Life Generation signs, so you can pick them up at all the corners. You can come to our national conference the day after the march. We have 2,500 young people.
This Saturday.
It's going to be the largest pro-life conference in the world. You can tune in, watch it live on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/studentsforlife.
And that's the event on Saturday. And of course, you can watch the whole event. We're on 9 to 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's right. EWTN has it all covered. You'll be seeing lots of our signs.
Yeah, blanketed. All right. Thank you so much, Kristen Hawkins, President, Students for Life of America.
Thank you.
Finally tonight, when faced with feeding hungry college students, President Trump made the decision a lot of adults do. He opted for fast food. But these college kids were the national champion Clemson University football team, and this wasn't your average meal.
Burger King, all-American companies. Burger King, Wendy's, and McDonald's. We have Big Macs, we have Quarter Pounders with cheese, we have everything that I like, that you like. And I know no matter what we did, there's nothing you could have that's better than that, right?
Okay, there was no formal dinner because of the partial shutdown. The president paid out of his own pocket for 300 hamburgers, plus pizza and French fries, and the players seemed to like it. There were 0 leftovers. Clemson won the title last week by beating Alabama 44-16. And one of my favorite pictures from that entire spread was the maitre d' lighting the candles on this table with Big Macs. It was great. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and at Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.